Hi, my name is Chris Parkhurst. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm also the host of the Documentary Life podcast, a show that spans 140 episodes, has been downloaded in over 135 countries, and I've been producing for about 5 years. I decided to put each and every episode up here onto YouTube to sort of expand the audience, and as we say in the show, maybe inspire and inform some more doc filmmakers, hopefully like yourself. In the episodes, you may find some older, maybe outdated URLs, in particular any of the documentary filmmaking courses that we do offer online. If you have any questions about the URLs, simply look in the show notes on this page, here on this YouTube page, and that'll be able to take you where you need to go to. Other than that, I hope you enjoy the show, and it's great to have another listener to the Documentary Life. Have a great day.
You know, you enter a film and it goes into this process and it's sort of selected, but it's interesting how the selection process works, because talking to people, you know, a lot of people have sort of said, well, yes, you can enter it in the ordinary way, but actually it's a lot better if you sort of, you know the person and know people there who are selecting and things like that. So in a way, it's been slightly disheartening hearing that and realizing that actually, you know, in the end, it comes back to knowing the right people again, which is often the case in this industry. So that's why I think things like Raindance and Melbourne are so good, because they'll accept sort of films that come from anywhere, and it doesn't matter if they haven't got that much funding or a big backer.
Hello and welcome to The Documentary Life, a show that sets out to inspire and inform you on how to best live and lead your own documentary life. I am your host, Chris G. Parkhurst, and this is episode number 29. And it is brought to you by Barong Films, proud creators of documentary film, the Documentary Life podcast, and the Documentary Academy, our industry-changing A to Z documentary filmmaking program that will transform you into the documentary filmmaker that you've always wanted to be. Find out more at thedocumentarylife.com/academy. What you're about to listen to is the second of a special two-part episode that we've put together about the world of the Documentary Film Festival as seen through the eyes of the filmmaker as well as the festival's director. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first of this special series, where we first talked with the director of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, Lyndon Stone. In it, he discussed how he first decided to put together a documentary film festival, some of the highlights of the upcoming 2017 event, as well as a few tips on how a documentary filmmaker might best apply to a festival like MDFF. We also had the pleasure of speaking with one of New Zealand's most respected documentary filmmakers, Costa Botes, whose film Act of Kindness is one of the films selected for inclusion into the MDFF program. Among other things, Costa spoke about the rather unique way in which this film came to be, how and why film festivals are a key component to a doc filmmaker's career, and he offered some first-hand insight into how some film festivals make their selections. In the second part of the series, we are honored to have on Richard Wyllie, a doco filmmaker who makes his living doing broadcast docs in the UK. His wonderful and moving film 5 Days of Lesvos is his first independent documentary, and it's making some serious waves in the film festival circuit, including Raindance, where it was nominated for Best Feature Documentary, and it was nominated for Best Documentary at the National Film Awards in the UK. So with that, let us check back in with Lyndon Stone, director for the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, as he discusses the types of films that were and were not selected as inclusion in this year's MDFF.
We've got such a diverse amount of documentaries. We've got stuff from Sierra Leone, we've got Belarus, Brazil, great one from Brazil, Edu with Claudio Cruz, great filmmaker, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada. So we look at things in an open book, but again, they're all ranked, you know. So, right. And everyone who submits their documentary, it's like their baby, you know. They think it is all brilliant, and majority of them are. Some aren't. When we first started in our first year, we did play some stuff from some filmmakers that were still kind of emerging kind of filmmakers, not so much established, but maybe this was, you know, some that weren't probably to a high standard as they are this year, because we wanted to support all forms of filmmaking, you know, and stuff like that. But the other thing is, you know, people are like, well, what about the quality of the festival as well? So we have to be a little bit more discerning in our second year, because we want to attract high quality documentaries, you know. But it's awkward because everyone, you know, it's almost like, you know, American Idol, everyone thinks they can sing, and some people can, some people can't. Same with documentaries. Some people are gifted filmmakers, and some people need a bit more time to develop, you know. So It's
Okay.
it's just trying to see what you can do to help people where you can. And that's where sometimes the feedback, if people want it, can come and be encouraging. Almost like a review, we can provide that to them if they request it, on their documentary. Yeah. I really try to encourage more people to get into documentary, particularly from photography. Or going back to like micro docs, trying to make a documentary maybe 2 or 3 minutes in length, and trying to tell a good. If they're just starting out, just trying to tackle, a story in 2 or 3 minutes, doing a micro documentary, and to see how they go. So I would encourage people that have always wanted to make a documentary, particularly photographers, to try to make a micro documentary, try and tell a story, have themes, motives, all in a compact 2 or 3 minute runtime, so particularly if they're starting out.
If someone approaches you and tells you that they want to start a film festival, what advice would you have for them?
I guess with a film festival, we need to have more film festivals. I think at the moment there's 6,000 film festivals in the world, and there needs to be more of these film festivals, having a greater sense of community, playing themes that relate to them. And I encourage people to do that. We're also partnered in the UK with the Cheap Cuts Film Festival, which is the only short documentary film festival in the UK, and it's a great festival. I was looking the other day. I was at the Cinema Museum in London, but they do a lot of good work. They start at the same time as us. This is their second year.
Okay.
And they're connecting with an audience there in central London, and have done an amazing job doing so. But we need more film festivals to support filmmakers. So I would recommend people stepping outside their comfort zone and to do that. But it's a lot of work, Chris. It's a lot of work, a lot of 18, 20-hour days. You really have to be, have a lot of will, a lot of passion behind that. It takes a certain kind of person to do that, to keep going, to keep doing that. But it's a lot of work. So you really have to have that passion, that drive. And you need to have those themes of you want to help people out. Like you want to help the filmmakers out. You want to, be passionate about film and storytelling. And I think it takes a special kind of person. But it's a lot of, you can't be flippant about it. You really have to want to do it and want to do it well. And I think our festival has done a great job of, attracting really good documentaries, getting sponsorship, social media. I think we're hitting all those marks in our second year, which is really, really great. And the future looks very bright. But I would encourage people to step outside their comfort zone and to give back, to the community. But also have a kind of character to carry that through. It's a lot of work. So,
Lyndon, I as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, and a listenership who are documentary filmmakers, I want to thank you for having a festival like this, and I can only wish you the most success. And I'm excited to, like I said, I'm excited to get this. To get this show out there and to have better. I guess I'm excited to get this show out there so more people can not only know about MDFF, but have for filmmakers to have a better understanding of what the process is and how it works for both the people that work for the festival as well as the filmmakers.
I hope that people can see the intention of the festival. It is for filmmakers to help them out, to help local Australian filmmakers to showcase their work. As I say, they struggle at the box office to break that $1 million barrier, and also for international filmmakers to have, to be in Melbourne, Australia, one of the coolest postcodes on the planet.
That's right.
Now with its own dedicated documentary.
That's right.
So I hope people have a look at that. And go, wow, what a lineup of documentaries! I want to be a part of that. It looks so cool. So I hope that people can see what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve.
So you've got a great idea for a documentary film. Awesome. I'd love to hear about it, but I don't have a ton of time. Can you tell me about it in 30 seconds or less? Oh, you don't quite have your pitch down yet. Okay, that's fine. What's your website where I can find more information? Maybe a press kit I can take a look at. You don't have one. Well, have you thought about how you might raise some funds to help with the costs of making films? They can be expensive, right? You haven't. Okay, maybe just tell me about your audience. Who's going to want to see your film? Who will you be marketing it to? You don't know this either. Okay, then I'm going to assume you haven't thought about how you'll be getting your film out into the world then, right? I think I see what's going on here. I was once in your shoes. A great idea for a doc. Camera in one hand, a boom mic in the other. But other than that, not much other than a whole lot of excitement and gumption. And that's great. You'll need all of that. But you'll also need a heck of a lot more if you're looking to make the kind of documentary film that you can be proud of. The kind that people will want to see and will impact them. The kind that won't break the bank while you're making it. And dare I say, you might even make some money from. You need support, and we've got you covered. We built the Documentary Academy with you in mind. We've got all the resources you need to make a successful documentary film you can be proud of. Come and enroll at thedocumentarylife.com/academy, and let's turn that doc idea into a reality. As you know, we have a couple of directors who are going to be on, Costa Botes as well as Richard Wyllie. And
Right.
we're honored and excited to have them on the show and to talk about both their films. What was it about these guys that made you have to have this included in MDFF?
It just comes back to the story making. Richard's, as I say, it's not necessary that it has had this great festival bow, which it's had, but it is a well-made documentary in a concise period. Like, it's an hour documentary. Just blown away by the filmmaking and stuff like that, and obviously the critics have been as well. So we've picked very astutely on that.
What was it about this film? What was it about Richard Wyllie's film that made you had to have it in this festival?
Well, obviously it's coming back to curating. Obviously, Melbourne has a very big Greek population, and what's happening in Greece at the moment is quite relevant and timely. And again, it's an exercise in great filmmaking, incredibly well made. And as I say, Melbourne has a very big, Greek population. So we want to try to kind of tailor things that will kind of connect with the Melbourne audience and narrative, Okay. So, yeah.
My dad is dead. Mama دمشق. أختي بدمشق. طالع على بلاد أوروبا بس عشان نأمن لهم حياتهم، نأمن مستقبلنا.
I know that we are illegal, but we had to. We didn't have any choices.
Your job is to save your life, and we did that.
They're still in the situation that they think there is a little bit hope, but in Europe there is no hope for these people.
When you're saying bye to your mom, to your dad, to your children, you're not sure that you're going to see them again.
And it's crazy that we're talking about surviving in this beautiful place, but yeah, well, like I said before, that's just how it is. So, yeah.
I started in about 2005 making documentaries, actually for a channel called Teachers TV, which doesn't exist anymore in the UK, which was a very good place to learn because the budgets were quite small and you were given a lot of responsibility quite early on, and so they sort of gave me a camera and said go out and make this, and then I saw it through the edit, and which is quite a hard experience to get because it's quite a competitive industry. So I was quite lucky, and it was a good place to learn. And then from then on, I've sort of moved into I've done bits of current affairs for Channel 4 in the UK, and also programs for sort of PBS in the States, things like that. Yeah. And as my career's gone on, I've gone more into sort of observational documentary. I like making films about characters and people, and although they often have a sort of current affairs element to them, I always try and keep it about the people. And I quite like films that sort of take a big issue and a political issue and see how the decisions that are made at a high level sort of filter down to affect sort of people on the ground. So, and that's kind of what I do now. And I've made films in America about children in prison in the States and things like that. So this particular subject was quite a good one that sort of appealed to me.
Well, and I think, you mentioned current affairs and yet telling people's stories being sort of the focus of your work. You guys entered a really focal point of, this, in particular, the Syrian refugee crisis in Europe, and your story, I think it could have in other hands, in other filmmakers' hands, it could have gone in any myriad of directions. And what isn't what is not there's no particular heavy-handedness in your film. It is as you've just described yourself as a filmmaker, which is to say that you're allowing the story itself really, and the people itself, to tell the story, and really in this case tell the story of the refugee crisis that's been happening in Europe. And that's really the remarkable part to me, is the decisions that you guys made as filmmakers not to be heavy-handed and not to take a straight up sort of political stance.
No, I mean, I like making films that aren't black and white and don't try and sort of tell you what to think. And I think the more nuance you've got there, the better. And you know, the audience might always come to films with a sort of preconceived idea of what they think, and showing the people in those situations and the nuances in the story. You know, I quite like sort of, you know, 1 minute people are thinking one thing and the next thing they're thinking something else.
Yeah,
and bringing out nuances is it's good, because there's always nuances in a story. There's two sides to it, and I think it's important to show both sides and then let people make up their own minds about the situation. And I think the skill of a filmmaker is to sort of, you know, take what you see when you're there and then make a sort of representation of that in the film.
We get a lot of tiny babies, and we really concentrate on the babies. I had one little girl, 10-year-old girl last week with chlorine burns from a chlorine bomb. Well, I'm a woodcarver, and I'm having to deal with all this because we don't have a doctor.
Okay, I think we got one, and it's definitely moving.
Someone out in the water? A child.
For the next 2 days there won't be any buses because there are too many people. Everyone has to go through this island. The rat race Europe is responsible for is just crazy.
We didn't imagine it's like this much difficult. Greece is just a step. We don't want to stay here.
They're taking criminal action against me. They say I've ruined the town and I've ruined Lesvos.
Crazy. Just can't understand it.
The film is 5 Days of Lesvos. Richard, why don't you give us, I think this seems like an appropriate time, tell us a little bit about what the film is about, as well as how the project happened for you and your colleague.
It started, as you said, the refugee crisis had been going on for a while. I mean, people have been landing on Lesvos as, you know, refugees for a number of years, actually. But that year, it started to, you know, as more and more were coming. And it got to sort of, I think it was July and or perhaps even June, and a lot were arriving, and the press coverage was sort of getting more and more. Certainly in the UK, no one kind of understood it, and the, you know, a lot of the sort of right wing press in the UK was saying, oh, yeah, they shouldn't be coming and things like that, and you know what's going on, and then I think David Cameron, our Prime Minister at the time, was sort of said that, you know, all these swarms of people are coming over, and the word swarms caused a lot of controversy,
yes.
and no one, and there was a feeling that I think Sam, the producer, and I wanted to find out what was really, you know, what these people were really, or why they were really coming over, because I think a lot of people, certainly in the UK, assumed that they were just coming here, and then it was portrayed that they were coming here, you know, for more money or to get our benefits. And
of course, that's the fear, and that has only increased, especially in the UK, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Sam read an article in probably the Guardian, about people around Europe that were actually helping refugees rather than sort of, you know, castigating them or turning them away. They were actually helping them.
Yeah.
And that was where she read about Eric, who's one of the characters in our film, and the great work he was doing. And so Lesvos looked like that was where a lot of the refugees were arriving. So we thought, well, I'd make contact with Eric, and Eric got back to me fairly quickly, which was great, and said, yeah, come along and, you know, and sort of see what's going on.
Yeah.
And we booked the flights. We didn't really at that stage have any idea really of what we might do. I mean, the thought was that maybe this would be the start of a longer film where, you know, you'd see them landing, and then hopefully maybe we could sort of follow them across Europe and see where they ended up, and
of course, right,
and see them making new life or something like that.
Right, but, or maybe follow one particular family, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's sort of all options are open, and that was one of the reasons why I sort of wanted to do it in a way, because if it was a broadcast project, you'd have to sort of write your treatment and send it to a channel and say exactly what you were going to sort of, what your story was going to be before you know it. Whereas with this, we didn't know what it was going to be, and we thought it would be the start of a process which could go on years. But so we booked the flights fully understanding that. I think it was in July we booked the flights, and we thought, oh, well, you know, the whole thing might have died down by the time we get there.
Oh wow!
And you know, if it has, we'll just have a nice holiday.
Yeah.
But so
the irony of the usage of the word holiday in regards to this film.
Yeah, and I think, and that was where, so we sort of arrived on the island with that, and you know, we hadn't really met anyone. There was a sort of vague plan to meet Eric, you know, at the top of the hill. Yeah. At sort of 6 a.m. When we were looking for the boats, and that was sort of all the preparation we've done, really.
Amazing.
And then we got there, and it's as you see in the film, it turned out that actually that week more refugees arrived than ever before, and that in hindsight that turned out to be, you know, a big week when it all started happening a lot more. And so once we sort of got back, we realised that actually that you could tell the whole story in the week, and that sort of embodied the wider picture really of what was going on.
Broadcast docs is how you make your living. Whereas as a documentary filmmaker, I have predominantly made my living in the commercial world. And I find it so liberating as a filmmaker at times to sort of break away from, you know, sort of the broadcast work or the commercial work, and sometimes actually almost have no idea what you're going to be filming, and just take your gear and go and see what happens.
Yeah.
There's something very liberating for that. What was that like for you?
I think, yeah, and it's often the best way to make a film. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the best documentaries really have come out of something you didn't know. You know, you take a risk and didn't know what you're going to get, and then it sort of devolves as you go. And I find the broadcast world is quite constrained in that. You know, as I say, you have to sort of pitch your story beforehand and sort of sell the story. And something like this would never have been commissioned for TV. If I'd said, "Oh, give me some money to go off to Greece and just see what happens," and and no one had ever given me any money for that, and all of a sudden have said, "Oh yeah, we'll put it on TV." So I don't think that's one of the things about this, is that it would never have happened if it had been for broadcast. So which is why film festivals are good.
It's truly remarkable what transpires in the course of 5 days. You couldn't have possibly envisioned this. You couldn't have possibly envisioned, you know, going to a town in this island off of Greece, and the refugees are coming in, and you're filming the refugees, and then within a day or two's time, suddenly, and of course, to paint a picture for the audience, this is massively a tourist town, and in fact, this island makes, you know, a lot of people's livings are tied into the tourist trade in this area. Yeah. And you really see, you know, the battle with locals, like say Eric, who takes it upon himself to help the refugees that are coming in. And then you have sort of the tourist sector, which is fighting against it because their lives are tied into this, and they feel like the tourist trade might be affected. And to see through the course of, you know, 5 days, in vast changes from day to day in terms of almost like the island's policy and attitudes towards the refugees is remarkable. You couldn't have possibly anticipated all of that happening in 5 days, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why we sort of went with an open mind, and it was only really, I think, for the first few days we were obviously filming this, and we, you know, it was all really interesting what was going on there. But I think it was the moment in the film, I think it's sort of just over halfway, when they closed that camp in the town, and the refugees that's the sort of turning point of the film, really. And that's what sort of made the story develop, you know, halfway through. And then obviously after that, then people have to start walking. And I think that was sort of what enabled the narrative to sort of develop, and that gave it the sort of 5-day structure, really.
And so are you guys pretty aware of that in the moment, say by day 2 or day 3, Richard? Do you feel like, you had that moment as a filmmaker where you realize, oh, wow, this is where the story turns. Like this is how it's going to happen. And now we have, like you said, this idea of a 5-day structure. Did you sense it at that moment? Like that day when the camp got closed down?
Not necessarily. I mean, we knew that was a big moment because obviously the camp was crucial to sort of helping these refugees as they arrived, then make their way down. I think we did think at that point, what's going to happen now, and then the consequences are obvious. But I think I think that point suddenly realised that the story was then developing, and then we sort of carried on. I think it was only after we got back really that we sort of sat down and thought, actually, there's a whole, by simply using the 5 days that we were there, you could actually tell a story which had a sort of beginning and end. Because I think the other thing was that after we got back, and it was clear that this this refugee crisis just wasn't going to end.
Yeah.
The other thing that was quite clear is that we it was very hard to follow families, and we did sort of get the contact details of the refugees that we followed, but we also realised that we probably didn't have enough money to keep this going for a long time and then start going and filming the refugees. And because we got a story over 5 days, and it was sort of you told a story, and that sort of told the story of the bigger picture. I think it sort of came to the conclusion that why do we need it anymore when so much happened in this week, and it sort of tells a really interesting story as it is, and the microcosm of that week really represents a sort of bigger whole, really.
Microcosm is, of course, the word that I was looking for. Thank you for helping me with that. Richard, talk to us about that moment as a documentary filmmaker where you're faced with the decision of coming out from behind the camera and actually assisting. You were assisting the refugees coming off the boats. What's that like? Because it wasn't a one-off either. You were doing that from anything I've read. You and your colleague, your producer, were doing that throughout the process. You were not only just filming, but you were helping the refugees off the boats as well. Is that true? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, Sam certainly sort of waded in and helped, and she speaks a bit of Arabic as well. So it was very useful because
okay.
That was the thing that struck us actually, was that, and I didn't realise this when we met Eric, and you see it in the film really, is that they're the ones helping, and they have to do them, help with medical attention and things like that. And it was the first time I'd ever, usually as a filmmaker, I think I've said about this before, you're filming experts who are the best people to be doing what they're doing, and so you film them doing their jobs, and that's the story. Whereas here, it was just volunteers helping, and so there were so many people, and they were so overwhelmed that you sort of had to help, really. I mean, you couldn't really just forget about it. So what would generally happen is the boat would arrive, and it was some way from the town, really. So they all these people had just got off this boat, and they had to then get into the town. So we'd film a bit of people getting off the boat, and then what you don't see in the film is that they all then a lot of people sort of had little cars, and they'd drive some of the more vulnerable people down into the town, and we did quite a lot of that, actually, sort of ferrying people down there.
Okay.
Which is why you don't see it in the film, because we were doing it rather than filming. So dilemma, because suddenly I felt like I could actually, I was just as well placed to help as other people, and Sam was as well. So often, like I say, that isn't the case. So we did the volunteers certainly. I mean, they were helping all the time. Like, we'd film a bit of people going off the boats, then we'd go off somewhere else. But the volunteers just kept at it all day, which was very impressive, really. They'd help people, and then more boats would arrive, and they'd dash off to help more people, and.
Hey, all you doc lifers, I wanted to take a quick moment to make a pretty exciting announcement. You may or may not know that this month, June 2017, marks the 1-year anniversary of the documentary life. So we are celebrating this rather momentous occasion by making a pretty momentous announcement. As of July 7th, we are expanding the show to become a weekly program. Yep, you heard that correctly. We are literally going to be doubling the output of episodes. Not only that, but we're going to be making some changes to our current format. Among other things, now each and every episode will contain a segment hosted by myself and a segment that is a shared conversation with the doc industry guest, which is basically combining elements of the 2 shows per month into 1 episode per week. So you'll be getting lots more information and inspiration in which you can apply to your own documentary life. To stay on top of more updates like this, podcast and blog notifications, film screenings, online tutorials, as well as special discounts and promotions only offered to listeners of this show, go to the website and sign up to become a Doc Lifer. That website is thedocumentarylife.com. The website contains special show notes that coincide with all episodes, the podcast archive, the TDL store, and the TDL blog, where we post the latest articles that we think will inspire and inform you to best live and lead your own documentary life. So again, head to the Documentary Life website today and sign up to become a Doc Lifer. And I realize, in the interest of time, we got to be careful here. Why don't we turn this conversation a little bit? Though I'd love to just continue talking about this film. Let's turn it to film festivals a bit. You mentioned that you did a project like this, like 5 Days of Lesvos, in part with the intention of seeing what you could do on the film festival circuit. How has 5 days done, and what has the film festival journey been like for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that, because well, firstly was that we'd edited the film and it sort of it felt like it was at a natural length, that it was sort of 62 minutes, and we didn't really have much more footage. That's the other thing I should say, actually. We only shot, I think I worked it out as probably about 12 hours of footage, which I edited down one film, which is very rare these days, I think. And but yeah, so that was that's what it came out at, and I realised that 62 minutes was sort of an odd length, because it's not really feature length. Sort of people think of 90 minutes, but it's also not a short. So right. I didn't know what festivals would think to that, and or how it might work in with programs and things like that, and not knowing much about it. So I was sort of intrigued to see what might happen with that, and we've entered it into various festivals, and it's done fairly well, I suppose. I mean, the great thing was we had our premiere at Raindance.
Yes.
In London last September, which was a really good festival to get into, and
it's fantastic.
About that. Yeah, and it was nominated for an award there as well, which was great, and we thought, this is good.
Onto something, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and obviously getting into Australia, the Melbourne Film Festival as well is great as well. But apart from that, it hasn't played at too many, and we're sort of trying to think about. Yeah, we obviously, when you start making, you sort of think about a festival strategy and where you might send it and things like that, and what festivals might be good, and and we sent it to various sort of things that we thought might be a good fit for things like film festivals which are about sort of social issues and even about refugees and things like that, and it hasn't got into those, which is kind of interesting, and I'm not sure why, and maybe just don't think it's very good, which is fair enough, but also. It does seem as though I think we've sort of been finding that the film festival world isn't, you enter a film and it goes into this process and it's sort of selected. But it's interesting how the selection process works, because talking to people, a lot of people have sort of said, well, yes, you can enter it in the ordinary way, but actually it's a lot better if you sort of know the person and know people there who are selecting and things like that. So, of course. So in a way, it's been slightly disheartening hearing that and realizing that actually, in the end, perhaps it's better if you do know the right. It comes back to knowing the right people again, which is often a case in this industry. So it's been an interesting process, and also seeing some film festivals, which it's sort of interesting. It got into, and I think that's why I think things like Raindance and Melbourne are so good, because they'll accept sort of films that come from anywhere, and it doesn't matter if they haven't got that much funding or a big backer. Whereas some festivals, I think, I've been to film festivals and seen a film that's been funded by huge studios that really isn't very good. And there seems to be quite a few out there, but you often get the feeling that because they've got a big backer that they have that then sort of the sort of impetus behind them to sort of get to get those bigger festivals. So it's sort of interesting, learning about film festivals and knowing that you have to have a strategy sort of beforehand to get it in. That seems to be how it works. Like I say, I don't have a huge amount of experience in this, but that's sort of what I gleaned from this experience. Really, is that Yeah, there aren't that many. I think in the end, there's not that many film festivals that are prepared to sort of take a bit of a chance on, on a film that isn't that well publicised and hasn't got a sort of big sort of strategy behind it.
The beauty of something like MDFF, the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, as you're starting to, I think, get into, is that, this is only its second year in existence. And what's really exciting about what Lyndon's doing is that he's not beholden to really anyone else or any corporate money. And it allows him to really kind of experiment not only with the film itself, the festival itself, but he can he can really kind of shape the kind of program that he wants right now. That may not be the case, say, in 5, 10, 15 years when maybe MDFF becomes a much bigger festival. But right now, it sounds like a really a cool festival to be a part of right now. And it sounds like you're getting in on something early on. And I really think Lyndon's onto something. And there is, like you said, there's something about festivals like Raindance and MDFF that you don't get at a Sundance or in Toronto or Hot Docs. And
absolutely.
I think there's a lot more films that will take more of more risks that you're more likely to see. And maybe the world gets represented a bit more in these types of festivals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's been sort of a bit of a, like I say, an interesting process for me, realizing that although you do have those creative freedoms doing independent film, and that sort of stands, you have to go into it sort of with an idea of what festivals might want it, and ideally get an agent quite early on and think about your festival strategy and all that also costs money, of course, and often yes, and trying to make these films cost enough money as it is, because you don't often get the money up front and things. So yeah, it's an interesting learning curve.
So in reality, Richard, when were you building a strategy for film festivals? Would you say that you were even doing this before you guys went to Lesvos, or was it during it that you start thinking about it, or shortly after once you've seen the footage? When did that really start entering into your consciousness and you became active in building a strategy?
I think it was after we got back really and knew what we had, and I had a job to go to straight after we got back, so I didn't really sort of start editing until the November actually that year, and then so I think it was only as we were sort of editing and knew that we had a sort of just a sort of longer film that we knew where we might sort of start to enter it, and then you have to sort of start looking at festivals where that are at a certain time of year, so that you can then get your the bigger festivals and have your premiere and things like that. So I think it was sort of in the sort of just a few months after we'd actually filmed it that we sort of really started thinking about what festivals to enter it in and things like that. And again, I didn't really know how much you needed to really have a strategy and things like that. But it, again, that's sort of what I learned, is that, you choose the right ones where you could have your premiere, and then you sort of work that backwards after that, really. So it's, so quite a long time afterwards, basically.
What have you learned from your festival experience now that you feel like you will apply in your documentary filmmaking moving forward?
I think mainly it's that if you want to get into the bigger festivals, then you need to sort of think about that right from the off, really, and things like getting an agent quite early and thinking about strategy, but also I think you have to think about how your film how it will sell, really, in the eyes of an agent. Quite early on, but as you're in the development process, think about what story you've got and who might be interested in that and things like that, which in a way is slightly disheartening, because that's again you end up being constrained by what people might accept and things like that. And so I think that's perhaps one thing I've learned is really you have to think about it right from the start, really, rather than after you've finished, which is what we did.
Yeah, right.
The other thing was that we really wanted this film to have not just get into festivals, but also have an impact and get so people would see it and learn more about the refugee crisis, really, and people that are involved. And I think that's been the other thing that sort of bit eye-opening is that, yeah, you also need a strategy for sort of, a social impact strategy almost, and think about what you can do with it and getting it out there, and that all needs to be built in. We've got things like archive in our film to show a news archive and things like that, and that costs a lot of money. And if you want to start putting it on the internet and things, you're talking thousands and thousands of pounds to clear the archive and things like that, and all that needs thinking about, because if you want to get it out there, then you have to pay for all those licenses and things. So that's another thing which is slightly annoying, is that if you want to get it out to as many people as possible, you sort of have to pay for that as well.
I assume, Richard, that that part of your strategy is that this is going to play in the broadcast market in the UK. Is that correct? I
don't think it is now, because again, I've sort of sent it to people, executive producers that I know, and while they think it's a very good film, it isn't the sort of, one exec even said this to me, it's a really great film, but they wouldn't go on TV, and I think the way it's cut and the way the story is told, you just wouldn't see something like that on British TV, I don't think.
Okay, well, you're going to have to explain that not only to myself but to my listeners, because I'm a bit, I don't want to sound naive, but programming to me in the UK would lend itself a bit more to a documentary like 5 Days on Lesvos than, say, in the US. Obviously, PBS would that would be PBS type programming, but I don't understand. Like you working in the broadcast industry, you're also going to have some idea about this. Please help me, educate me on why and how this is a film that wouldn't necessarily be, why it wouldn't be picked up for broadcast. I think it's perfect for it, and it's an incredibly timely issue. So what am I missing here?
Well, I think my experience is that, although yes, I think British TV is very good actually, and they are prepared to air documentaries which perhaps are a bit different sometimes. And when I say different, I sort of mean, this doesn't have any commentary, and it's very rare that you'll see a documentary on TV without any commentary. And things like having a pre-title at the start are one thing that I never understand with broadcast documentaries on TV, is that usually you're expected to have a sequence at the start which basically shows you everything that's going to be in the program.
Right, well, that's TV, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of expected, whereas this obviously doesn't have that, I like, as a director, using sort of techniques of drama and the way stories are told in drama and bringing that to documentary. So you don't have a pre-title, and it's quite intriguing, and you sort of let the story unfold. But there aren't many documentaries that do that in broadcast in such a way, and I think that's sort of the main thing about this, is that it doesn't have that pre-title, and it starts and there's no narration, and I think that's sort of what it is really, and broadcast has its sort of set slots. It has certain films that go on at certain times, and Current Affairs is sort of 9 o'clock-ish, and this is a bit of a hybrid, and so there's no obvious slot that it will go into, and I think that's another reason why it isn't necessarily it wouldn't go on TV.
I'm not sure I still understand, but that's okay. And it's probably just because on an emotional level, both as a documentary, fellow documentary filmmaker, but also being someone who I feel like I will certainly be championing this film. I whatever, I don't understand.
I think it's just a way of, there's a certain sort of convention in broadcast films.
I get it. Yeah, sure.
To fit into, and when something doesn't fit into that, again, channels don't want to take a risk, ultimately, and it's understandable. They're sort of after viewing figures, and if they don't want to take a risk on something that, if people aren't sort of immediately hooked in, then they might turn over and things like that. And I think that's why they, there's a sort of convention, and like I say, understandably, perhaps channels, broadcasters are, are loath to take something which is perhaps a bit different.
What you mentioned early on in the program that, I mean, of course, you've done work here in the UK with like Channel 4 and ITV, and you mentioned early on PBS work, and you mentioned doing some projects in the US. What has taken to the US, and what are you finding different about, well, what intrigues you about going to the US and telling stories there?
I mean, America, it is a great place to make documentaries, actually. It always films where it feels like, coming from the UK, certainly, when you go to America, it feels like one big film set, and everything's great there. And people, actually, what's great about the US is that people are very open. I think more so than they are in Britain. Really, is that people are a lot more open in the US. And
right, I think so too.
And happy to talk about things and issues. And whereas I think in Britain everyone's quite reserved and
a little more tight-lipped. Yeah,
can't over-dramatize anything too much, because that isn't the British way. Whereas America, I think they sort of love drama, and obviously, like I say, it's a great place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why I like the film I made in the US about it was about, like I say, it was about children in prison in Indiana, actually, and it was really interesting because it was about children who were tried as adults. And the American justice system is always very interesting because I mean, there's been lots of films that have sort of documented that, and that's one aspect which is good. So yeah, I do enjoy filming in the US. So see what else comes along.
Do you have any other projects happening over there anytime soon?
Not anytime soon. Yeah. No, I'm working on a film here in the UK, and then I'll sort of see what happens. And yeah, obviously it's an interesting time for America at the moment, as it is in Britain.
Yes,
going on. So
hey, we need to be out there telling as many stories as possible right now.
Yeah,
it couldn't be a better time, really. That's the irony of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, that's probably all I have. I guess the last thing that I will ask you, and it's something that I'll end asking a guest is I'll end with asking them how they lead sort of their documentary life. And again, that there's many ways to answer that. And it can include how you currently make a living. But the idea is, what is it that you do to provide for yourself and or your family? And that can be financially, spiritually, emotionally, what you're doing that allows you to be able to do the passion of documentary filmmaking. So I guess I would say, Richard, how is it that you would define and how do you lead your own documentary life?
Good question. I mean, it's at a basic level, I'm quite lucky, really, in that I've got to a place in my broadcast career where I'm making the kinds of films that I'd like to make, as in, sort of character-led documentaries about sort of issues, social issues, and so I'm quite lucky in that I get to do that and get paid for it, which I think is actually quite rare in this industry. And
absolutely.
And as I sort of go on, I want to have more creative freedom, and so I think I want to do more and more sort of non-broadcast projects in a way, but while keeping my hand in doing those as well, because I mean it is great, like I say, and obviously you need to get paid in some way. So I think I want to try and find a balance between doing broadcast projects, and interesting broadcast projects, but also developing my own ideas and making independent films when the opportunity comes along. And I think that doing things like 5 Days on Lesvos, where we simply saw the story and thought, right, I want to go and make a film about this, and go off and do it. And that really is the ideal. And and the more I can try and find a way of making money in that way as well, because I think that's you mentioned about family and things, and you do have to sort of make a living out of it as well. And yes, trying to find a balance between. I mean, perhaps I've been a bit unfair on the broadcast world, because I am very lucky in that I do have, compared to a lot of people, a lot of freedom to make the kinds of films that I want to make. So I do enjoy doing that, but I'm always, perhaps as a director, I'm always after more and more freedom to be more and more creative, and I see independent films as a way of doing that. So ultimately, I want to try and find a balance between doing broadcast work that I can get paid for, and independent films which I can just do whatever I like and try out new things and new stories and take you to places that you wouldn't usually get to go to doing broadcast work.
Richard, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. It's been a wonderful, enlightening conversation. I know that I myself have gotten a lot from it, and I know that my listeners will as well. So Yeah, thank you so much for
Good.
agreeing to have this conversation.
No, thank you. No, thank you for asking. I'm glad you like the film.
Have a great rest of your day, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, take care, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
Hey, can I ask a quick favor? If you found this podcast helpful in living your doc life or making your doc film, will you help us share it with more people by giving us a stellar review on whichever platform you use to listen to this podcast? We'd really appreciate it, and you'll be helping the doc filmmaking community find us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for listening to the show, and remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, remember, for any of the URLs that may or may not be outdated and you want to get the most up-to-date information, perhaps for the documentary filmmaking courses, for the blog, for other episodes, just go ahead and check in the show notes below on this YouTube page, and that'll give you the correct URLs to use. Thanks again. Have a great day.